Hey there, before we get to this Table Talk video, I just wanted to direct your attention to the link in the description of this video. This link is for a survey that we're asking everyone to help fill in. The information provided helps us as a faith community understand how to best fit the needs of those in our local community, in our schools, and for our families. So please, either while you're watching this video, you could pause it now and take it, or you can do it after the video. We'd ask that you check out that survey link in the very bottom description. Hope you enjoy this.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us for what we are calling Table Talks. We've been doing these as a church for the last several months, where we talk about some issues that are showing up in society, and there's a lot of things that people are talking about right now that get very heated. And so we thought we would sit down, have conversations that hopefully bring more light than heat, and try to help people see some things and illuminate some things, and maybe see things in a new light. And so today we are having a table talk conversation around homeschooling or schooling at home. And the reason we're having this conversation is because a lot of parents right now in our culture are almost pulling their hair out and kind of freaking out because some things are changing in the public school system. And a lot of people are taking on the journey of homeschooling for this fall. They're taking that on now, whether they wanted to or not. And so we know that there's going to be a lot of people that are doing kind of your typical homeschooling schedule this fall. And then there's a lot of other people who are going to be doing the virtual public schooling at home this fall as well. So what we're going to do is have a conversation about that. And I've invited three friends here who are homeschooling veterans. They've been doing this probably 30 plus years combined with all of them. And I've invited them here to talk about tips and tricks around homeschooling, the things that they've learned, the hows and the whats and the whys of that, so that we could all learn from them. And hopefully this will help you as you look at your journey for the fall. I know there's a lot of questions, a lot of concerns. We will open up for questions at the end so that you can text in some questions, and we'll sort of do a Q&A at the end so we can kind of cover the ground that you want to cover. So hopefully this will be fruitful and helpful, and I really think you're going to get a lot out of it. As I've talked to these ladies for years and learned a ton from them, and I wanted you to hear from them as well. So let me introduce them to you, or let them introduce themselves. We'll start with my friend Nikki across the table. Nikki, tell us who you are. Tell us the ages of your children, because how you homeschool changes very much with their ages. And then give us why did you get into it? Like, why did you decide to go down that road?
Okay. My name is Nikki Brungard, and I have been homeschooling. This is my 14th year. So my children are now 18, 14, 13. No, 18, 15, 13, and one just had a birthday. And how I got into homeschooling, I decided as a college student. That's not your typical way into homeschooling. But what I was learning about education at the time and homeschool families that I had met, and I went, wow, I really like them and I really like those kids. I want to find out more about that. So I decided long before I had a husband, long before I was married, that I was going to homeschool. So when I did get married, I was just like, I'm homeschooling. I hope that's cool. And he was like, sure, whatevs. And so here we are, 14 years later.
So for you, it was, I'm in on this. It was a pre-decision. I'm definitely homeschooling before I have children, before I have a spouse. This is definitely going to happen. So you were all in on this.
Yes.
Okay. Different than Amy. Amy came in a very different direction to homeschooling. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I'm Amy Martinez, and I have 5 children aged 30 to 16, so the baby's 16. And when we got into homeschooling, we knew one family in a different state that had homeschooled, and it was not anything that we had ever considered, like not even thought about considering. So it wasn't like we thought about it and said, no, that's not for us. It wasn't, on our radar at all. But what happened was our oldest son, when he was in high school, started making some choices that just weren't really healthy for him physically, as well as academically, because they were making him have consequences that were pulling him out of school. So that was putting him behind academically, but also the whole physical part of it. So in a crisis situation, we just decided to pull him from school and start on that journey with just him. We still had one that was going to school in 8th grade at the time, one that was in 1st grade, and 2 that hadn't entered the schools at all. But about 6 months in, we saw some really huge benefits and decided that we'd go ahead and give it a go with all of them and have never looked back.
Cool. That's fantastic. And then this is my friend, actually my best friend, Abby, who I liked so much, she agreed to marry me. So we've been married 22 years. And I'm going to ask you like I don't know, but tell us about your children and how old they are and a little bit about why you got into homeschooling.
Okay. Well, I have 3 children. We have 3 children. They are ages 17, 15, and 13. And we got into homeschooling. Really, we had a couple of mentors. Chris and I got married right out of college, and we had a couple of mentors in our lives in college who had homeschooled their kids. And so it was something that we were aware of. It was on our radar, but definitely had not bought into that. We were just like, oh, people homeschool, that's a thing. But when our oldest was 4, and it was time to start thinking about, what are we doing next year, and kindergarten and that whole thing. He was a reader already, and he's just sort of been an intellectual from the beginning. And I thought, well, if I send him to kindergarten, I'm worried that he's going to be bored and kind of be maybe annoying to his teachers, or just I felt like he already knows the things for kindergarten, and so we could try that homeschooling thing that our friends did. And so I had conversations with another friend who was also considering it for her son. And I just figured, well, he can already read, so how bad can I mess this up? If this is a complete bust, we'll start first grade next year and we'll be fine. So that's kind of how we got into it at the beginning.
So very different stories. I've wanted it. I'm sold out for this idea. Maybe not kicking and screaming, but definitely wait a second, I don't know if we're into this, and it took you a while, and then maybe somewhere in between where you're like, let's just give it a shot and see if it works well. But there are, not only are there different ways we get in, there's different things that we mean when we say homeschooling, and the experiences are pretty wide from of what people do and how they make it work in their own families. So Abby often says it's a choose your own adventure when it comes to homeschooling. So let's have each of you answer this one. What does it look like for you? What does it like? Kind of what does a typical day look like for your flow? And then how did it look different over the years? Because we all have teenagers, but we did this when they were kindergarten, second graders as well. So how is it different now than it was then? So whoever wants to go first, jump in on that one.
I'll go ahead.
Okay.
I think for us over the years, it's been a choose your own adventure, and sometimes that's year to year. Sometimes maybe joining a homeschool co-op is the best thing for us, and so there are co-ops all over the country that maybe a lot of people just don't realize are there. And so we've done homeschool co-ops. We've done where I just teach everything. One of my kids has done an online class. Another one has attended in-person classes with another mom that was teaching. So it really has just been different throughout the years, depending on the child, depending on what their learning style is, depending on what their needs are right then, if we need to improve in some areas or slow down in some areas, and so much depends on our family schedule. I wish I could say there's a typical day at my house. I have homeschool friends that are like, their kids are up at 8, they're at their desk by 8:30, their work is done by 2, and we are not that family. And so it really depends on what the ebb and flow of our family life is right then as to what a day actually looks like. When they were little, it required a lot more hands-on from me, and now they're very independent. And so they kind of know, here's what my work that I have to do, and they just kind of do it, and I supervise and help. But it's just a little different now than it was. I think we were more structured when they were little. I want to be one of those really structured people. I'm just not.
All right, fair.
Same as with Nikki, our family doesn't have a typical day because our style of learning has, just like she said, it's progressed from year to year. And we tried different styles of learning where there was very, structured, and we were following the curriculum and checking off the boxes and just making sure that all the bases were covered. to, as they got older, turning more towards an approach that is unfortunately called unschooling. It's a horrible name for it because it really does sound like we're doing no school whatsoever. But what it really is it looks more like adult learning, where on the evenings or the weekends, adults are pursuing their own interests and they're finding the resources that they need to learn what they need to learn, My husband has his own business and he studies in the evening for radon right now. And at the same time, Grace is really into singing. She takes voice lessons, and she has been learning how to produce her own music. So it's following their pursuits, their interests, and helping them by providing them the resources they need to dig deep, and then being involved enough to look at what they're doing and turn what you're seeing into academic language for when you have to make a transcript. So it's all there. The academic learning is there. It's just you have to be more involved so that you can pull those things out of it to, make it well-rounded and complete.
And when you said you started structured, I've seen it because some of the stuff we bought maybe early on when we were first getting in. Structured can look like you get a book for a subject and it says day one, like to the parent, like say these words, and you're supposed to say them to your child, and then they do the thing, and then there's that structure.
That's exactly what we started.
So you started with that. You were like reading the script to your child.
I was like, oh, this is how you teach a child to read. You say, A has a name, but it also has a sound, just like a cat is a cat, and it says meow. A says ah. And it says it right in the book, and I just read it right out of the book. So that's not so good with high schoolers. So you've shifted that a little bit, and they got cat, they got the sounds down, and you've moved more into what you're saying is like adult learning, which is I hadn't even thought of it that way, but that really is like how do we as we get older go figure out what we want to know, and then. Yeah. Right, and as adults, there are classes for some of the things we want to learn, and it's perfectly fine to put your child in a class, an individual class. It's perfectly fine to get textbooks, with the style of learning that we're doing, to get textbooks and use those as a tool rather than as your master of, what you have to do each day. So,
That's great.
I look up on my bookshelf, and we have textbooks on the shelves, but they're only the ones that the kids actually had an interest in the topics. All the rest, they were not afraid to see me sell at the end of the year.
Sure.
But there are some I've had to buy back because they were upset that I sold them.
All right, so let me turn to you, Abby, as one who I have experienced, appreciates a lot of structure. How would you say your typical day has been when they were little, maybe now, and the kind of curriculum, what did it look like for you?
So when they were, when we were starting with the first one in kindergarten, I am a person who likes structure. I've never been able to do the exactly like get up at 8, be at the desk at 8:30. I'm not quite to that level, but felt like I at least need a framework or an outline, like some kind of skeleton. But when we were first starting out, I was like, I just need a money-back, idiot-proof guarantee. And so I bought the curriculum in a box that literally gives you a money-back guarantee. Not that if your kid doesn't learn, but if you just don't like it for whatever reason.
And we got our money back.
We got our money back.
True.
But the great thing about it was, about that and about just this kind of a microcosm of homeschooling, we went through it for a few weeks, and on day one, I was like, oh, Lord, like some of this is just too much to say this. And some kind of felt like a mile wide and an inch deep. And so after a few weeks, I was like, well, we are not doing that anymore, and we're not doing that anymore. This is really good, and I like this part, and this works well, but that's got to go. And so we did. I chose one where I could even bits and pieces get money back from it. So that was our first year, was like had trial and error, and we kept the things that worked. And then I am also a very visual and hands-on person. Like to make a choice, I felt like I need to physically see this stuff. So I went to the big homeschool convention, and I was sure it was going to be a bunch of people that looked like they belong on Little House on the Prairie. And I wasn't sure this was going to be my deal, but I was like, I have to see the books. So I went and thumbed through the books and found something that looked like, oh, okay, this is structure, and this is I can do this. This is conversation. It's enough of structure that I feel like, I'm not doing it wrong. Which, P.S., there's not really a way to do it wrong. And we just kind of kept on with that particular curriculum, a sort of set of books from different places. But I kind of picked and chose. And we did that for a while, and then we joined. I guess it'd be called a co-op called Classical Conversations, and that for me was we got to get out of this house and around some other people, and so we did that for a while, one day a week, along with the stuff that we did at home, and then. When they got to, when the oldest really got to sort of middle school age, I was kind of feeling a shift in myself. We had one shining year where I had the color-coded spreadsheet of times and timers, and we did it almost perfectly, not totally perfectly. And after that year, I was like, this is not it. We've got to do something else. And at that point, started looking for somewhere to enroll my oldest because he needed math that I was not equipped or, more importantly, willing to dive into again. And so for the past few years, they've been in what's sometimes called a university model school, where they go 2 days a week. They get their coursework, their lectures. They interact with other students and teachers. And then when they come home, they sort of manage their workload. And so in some ways, it's almost gone from like less structure to more structure. For us over the years, as we sort of have an eye toward that like all important transcript. I was like, I need something with no guesswork about the transcript. So as you can see, there's lots of different ways to skin a fish.
One of the ways that a lot of people are going to be into this fall, and I've heard like enrollment in various homeschool groups and people choosing or putting in their notice that they're going to homeschool. I've heard that's way up in the last couple of weeks. So a lot of people are going to go into sort of a true homeschooling thing that we just described. And then a lot of people are going to go with the public school to, as I understand, is a sort of a virtual public school where it'll be all online, but with kids at home. So there's some overlap there. Those aren't exactly the same. What do you see as the same there, and what do you see as different between the current proposed virtual public school and true homeschooling?
I'll answer first, and then y'all can fill in my gaps. The thing that Chris and I were having a conversation about this, and the thing that I would say about what to me is the key difference is the agency that you have in your child's education when you are doing sort of true homeschooling. And it's sort of the difference between authority and responsibility. If your children are at home and you are working out, you're working under someone else's authority, you still have the responsibility to keep them on task, to follow through, to make sure they're doing those things, but you may not necessarily have the authority to choose when something's good for them, sort of mid-course, or if they need something extra, you may not have the authority to change the structure to best suit your child. And I would say that's the main difference. Like these ladies said, there are online options, and our kids have done some online classes and, sat in front of their computer and listened to the instructor and done that whole thing. But the difference, I think the biggest difference is just, do you have the agency? Do you have the authority to make decisions independently, or are you under someone else's authority?
Yeah.
All right, well, let's talk about that then. For a lot of people, I think the intimidation factor of homeschooling, because we've all heard this, that when you say you're going to homeschool and you tell someone, hey, we homeschool our children, a lot of people respond with, I could never do that, or they'll say something like that, or wow, you must be some fill in the blank, you must be amazing or strong, or you must be more disciplined or whatever. And I know a lot of us who homeschool sort of feel like, yeah, I'm just not special. Like I I don't know, I'm like working it out over here. Like I'm not there's no cape attached to my clothes, you know. So what would you say to people who are now having this basically thrust upon them, whether they, you know, and maybe they feel that way. Maybe they're like, maybe what they would say is like, I just don't know how to teach my kid. Like, how am I going to do this? What would you say as people who had to learn how to do it yourselves? What would you say to that person? Like, I don't know how to do this.
I think for me, I get that a lot from parents. I think that's probably one of the most common things that we hear is, I could never do that. I'm not that patient. I'm not that smart. I'm not that fill in the blank. And I always just try to encourage people, you can do it, but it's a choice. You have to choose to do it. And so for me, I've had to lay aside some things in my life so that I can make this choice, but it can be done. And I think going into this season where we see so many parents with this challenge that just landed in their lap, I want to take that burden off of them and say, you're not asked to be doing traditional homeschool because, like Abby said, someone else is an authority for that component. You've still got the responsibility side, but you don't have the authority side. And I feel like so many parents are, running to Pinterest and getting their schoolroom ready and setting things up. And it's become this burdensome idea that maybe it doesn't need to be. So when they say, I could never do that, you can. There's not one thing, I guarantee you, and I just met Amy today, there is not one thing that makes us super amazing. It is just, we are regular people, regular moms who made a choice for our families, and we follow through every day. And some days, I learn the material 5 seconds before I have to teach it, or I refresh my memory 5 seconds before I have to teach it. As long as you are one day ahead of your kid, you don't have to be light years, one day ahead, you can do it. And so I don't want parents walking into this thinking it has to look a certain way, or to be burdened by the idea of, I'm now a traditional homeschooler, when you're really not. So just remove that pressure from yourself.
Anyone have anything to add to that? I guess I would say I have seen people flourish under this. I was talking to a friend who has 4 children under the age of 12, 4 or 5. Now I forget. He's got a lot of kids. And he said, back in March, when the kids were out of public school and they came home, and he said, my wife's staying home and she's working with them. He said, my kids are so much more pleasant right now. And I was like, what? And he goes, I think it's because they get more sleep at night because we're letting them sleep in a little bit. And that's just like one of those things that you don't realize about the lack of sleep for kids. And you don't realize that, you don't have to get them up at 6 to get on a bus or whatever it is. You can flex this a little bit, and there's some real advantages, and you may find your relationship with them is better or something because of that. Yeah.
So I did think of something I wanted to add to that, and it's kind of like what we had mentioned before, that when we were trying to follow a curriculum that had a lot of structure to it, that maybe that became burdensome. And so right now, those parents who are doing a virtual public school option may get to a point where, like, they may think, I want that authority and just the responsibility, but they may get to a point where that authority feels burdensome to them. And I just want to point out that they always have the option to change. Mm-hmm. There's no time within the school year that you can't decide to homeschool in a traditional way and send in your notice of intent and start doing that.
Yeah, that's good. I think as we went into homeschooling, we had to keep in mind, this is, for us, when we started with our old, this is one kid for 1 year. We're not committing to do this forever for every kid, like take it as it comes. And I think for a lot of people to go, okay, the fall, let's break that down. September, let's see how September goes with this scenario, and then let's go from there, and you can always make a shift. I think that's a great point. Let's talk about one of the sort of the classic things that comes up on homeschooling. And I've actually heard this from, I've talked to parents and teachers right now in the public school system, and some of the parents have said to me, I'm concerned with my kid being at home. I'm concerned about socialization, is what they'll say. I'm like, my son's an extrovert and he wants to be out with his friends, and my daughter, really wants to connect and all that, which I think we all totally get. It may be the number one thing that you hear about homeschooling. When you tell people you're going to homeschool, they'll say, well, how will you get your kids socialized? How do you respond to that? Like, what is...
Okay, so right now, because we are dealing with the pandemic, it is a little bit different than what it would typically be like or what it has been like for us in the past. But it's a real concern, if people are only used to having the after-school activities and the in-school socialization factor, it's hard for them to see outside of what else is out there. But some ways that our kids have been able to have that socialization in their lives is through meeting friends at organized park days. You and my girls take a dance class that meets, every other Friday night throughout the school year. And, there's 150 kids usually signed up for that. So there's a lot of socialization there. There are opportunities.
To be clear, I don't just take dance classes with teenagers. I am a sponsor, a helper there. So I just wanted to... It sounds a little weird.
Yeah, your son is there too, and you were there and it's involved
so
father.
I'm like a chaperone kind of dancer. All right, thank you.
Okay, so now that that's been cleared up, there's just things in the summertime like Quill Theater, which is a well-known theater in the area, puts on a teen program throughout the summer where kids can get involved and learn about Shakespeare and learn about acting and perform. And they, my kids have made some good friends through that. So the socialization is very similar, I think, to just after-school activities that you would normally put your kids in or summer programs that you would put your kids in. It just happens to happen sometimes in the middle of the day. Mm-hmm. And right now during, the situation we're in with the pandemic, a lot of that has gone online. Right. So my kids are having Skype calls and Zoom calls and, two of my kids are pretty big gamers, so they've always had online socialization through, the games that they play internationally, and they have friends around the world, so.
Yeah, good.
Everyone's looking at me like, oh, I bet she has something to say. I think this is the number one thing we probably hear as homeschool moms is, what do you do about socialization? And I think that was a valid question a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades ago, but we're not really there as a homeschool movement. We've had so many good advocates for us, both like on the state level, on the national level, where homeschooling has grown so tremendously that we're not, I think a lot of times people think we're all wearing jean jumpers with apples on them and we're cloistered in our homes, and that's just not a good representation. But I understand if people have kind of a 30 years ago perspective of homeschooling, that's probably valid because there was maybe some of that kind of stuff going on. We have never in my 14 years of homeschooling lacked socialization, but I think some of that comes too from parents. Your kids will be as social as you are, and a lot of times people say, oh, I met some homeschoolers, they're weird. Well, guess what? Usually their parents are weird. And I've also met some public schoolers who are weird, and guess what? Their parents are weird. So it's not just homeschoolers, there's lots of weird ones. Probably mine are. But sorry, kids, they're not really. But there are definitely a lot of things that are parent-driven, and you can be as social as you want to. I guarantee if there is a public school option for your child, whether it's theater or speech and debate or sports, there is also the homeschool option for you. It's just knowing where to look. For me, I am president of an athletic organization that is just homeschoolers here in the Richmond area. And so my kids are in the gym. They were in the gym for many, many hours last night. They'll be in the gym again Thursday. We have regular practices, regular seasons. And so a lot of people think, oh, we can't play sports, or my kid can't take dance class or something like that. And those opportunities are all there. And the socialization question comes a lot too, from the perspective of they think that socialization only comes through your peers. And I think one of the beauties of homeschooling is my kids have not only been socialized by kids who are their same socioeconomic level, their same ethnicity, their same age. Their socialization, the beauty of homeschooling that I love is they talk just as normally to 3-year-olds as they do to 73-year-olds. They're comfortable in all of those settings and have genuine friendships with adults that have poured into them. So they only haven't been surrounded by the same 25 kids kind of in a homogenous structure. And so for me, that's given them more well-rounded social skills than maybe they would have gotten elsewhere.
I experienced that firsthand when we were looking at homeschooling. We saw some friends we hadn't seen in years, and when we knew them before, their daughter was like maybe 8 or something, and so we saw them years later, and their daughter was 16, and we were all out at dinner one night, and she was in town. They were in town for like a debate competition for homeschoolers, and so we're having dinner with them, and this 16-year-old girl, and I'm probably 30 at the time or something, and this 16-year-old girl has just been reading the books that I've been reading, and we were sitting there having these conversations about like Thomas Friedman books and all this stuff, and I was like, what on earth, who is this? Like, it was just so different than a conversation that I had had with maybe most teenagers that I had met. And so that was an eye-opener to me. I was like, I don't know what they got going on over there, but I want to find out, because she was great to talk to, and I thought, man, her social skills with an adult, I mean, she wasn't like eye rolling, like, oh, adults are weird or whatever. Like, she was great. And so I just thought, whatever they got going on there, I want to teach our kids to do that too. So I think that's a great, like, underappreciated thing of like the range of ages and not just being in age group batches through your life, you know, because once you get into the working world, like, it's all ages, right? All the time. So yeah, that's been a big thing. Since I mentioned working there, one of the challenges a lot of families are running into right now is 2 parents working maybe full-time at home. Some of them work from home, some don't. Like, how are they going to navigate this? Single parents have some unique challenges with all of this. Like, so talk about working. I know that you've all worked some during this in different ways. How have you been able to work from home or at a job out somewhere while still doing this?
Well, I'll start. I have had a number of different jobs over the years, and actually just in 2017 went back to grad school and finished a 2-year degree, and so have changed careers along the way. One thing I will say, and we'll talk maybe a little bit more about choices, but it is about choices, and there's only so much you can do with the time that you're given, you know, unless, you know, Professor McGonagall gives you a time turner, you're going to have to figure out how to work with that 24 hours every day. And, you know, who's minding the children? And so it does require some creative thinking, some flexibility. I have worked from home with children there. I have worked in an office with children there. I have worked in an office without children there. I have worked in retail. And so it does require some creativity and some flexibility. And for me, it was a matter of my priority is the choice that I've made and the commitment I've made to my family in this way. And then I will figure out how to make work fit around that. And that's not to say that I don't have passions and interests. I went back to school to follow some of those passions and interests and have been sort of tweaking how I do that over the years. But I guess just kind of overarchingly, I would say, if you make this a priority commitment, then you will have to be creative in other ways. You know, I've worked from home some. Chris has enough flexibility that he's been able to work from home some, you know, 1 day a week, typically over the years. And so that's some of the kind of ways that we've managed that.
Yeah, so like Abby, I've done a lot of different types of work. I was the gig economy before it was a catchphrase. And just like Abby said, we had made a commitment to this lifestyle, but I still needed something that made me feel, that fed my ego a little bit. That was about me, you know, like this is the thing that I do that my kids can look at me and say, oh, my mom does this, my mom does that, we're proud of her for this. And that helped to contribute to providing for all of those social activities that are present in the homeschool community. So some of the things that I've done is I have worked in small business offices, like people who have their own business that they run from home. I do administrative work there. I've worked for small churches doing bookkeeping. I've done Airbnb cleanings, and with that one, it was one where I was able to take the kids with me, and they were older, they were already teens, and I took one at a time, and so I took, the first daughter went with me, and so she worked with me. So she had her first work experience, and it was alongside of me, but it was for somebody else with their standards, and we had to meet those things. And then when she was ready and moved into the outside working world, then the next daughter came alongside me and did that as well. So I've worked from home. I am currently working from home because of the pandemic. I've worked outside of the home, and I've done it with children alongside me and let them learn from that as well. And I've done it just so that I could have some sanity to myself to get out of the house and be an adult.
I just want to add something real quick on that too, is a lot of homeschooling, traditional homeschooling parents work. A good number of my friends are in the healthcare field where they're able to work part-time or they have their own businesses or whatever. And I think working is definitely a challenge. Working full-time, definitely a challenge. And I'll be honest, working full-time and trying to traditionally homeschool full-time, you just got yourself 2 full-time jobs. And that just is honest. And what I'm seeing coming out of the expectations that are gonna be on a lot of these parents to do public school at home, it's gonna be a lot. And so it's gonna be a challenge. And that's why I think the beauty of traditional homeschooling, where you have the flexibility to decide, my kid's not gonna be in front of that screen for maybe 6 hours, or they have to sign in, as I understand some of the schools in our area have to sign in at certain times. If you choose that option for your kids, then you're choosing that authority and you don't have that flexibility. If you want to say, hey, no, I still want to work, but I want to control what times my kids go to school or what times their work is done, you can have that authority on your own and still be working. And so my friends who are homeschool moms and working, that's basically what they do. Some of them will work second shift or third shift. Some of them might work 2 days a week, or some of them just say, school is never in the morning at our house because I have to work. And so school at our house, or when I work with them, is from 7 at night and on. And so taking a traditional homeschool route gives you more flexibility in those areas, just to encourage people that it can be done, but it's going to look very different depending on which option you choose, whether it's a traditional homeschool option or an option where the public school system has authority over your schedule.
Yeah, and I feel a lot of compassion for, I was in a room last week, I think Amy, you were there, I think you came in as well. There was parents and teachers, and we're trying to brainstorm like, hey, this is happening, and this was right after Chesterfield had announced what they're doing. Richmond Public School had announced that they're going to virtual, and so there was this conversation around trying to find out from teachers, how are you feeling? Not great. They weren't feeling great. And asking parents, how are you feeling about? Not great, right? So there's hard stuff here, and in some sense, there's nothing we can say that makes that better. There's nothing we can say that there's no magic bullet here. Everybody is having. I mean, you could say this about all of what's happened since March 13th or whatever in the U.S., but everybody's having hard decisions forced upon them with limited information, where you have to make choices, and there's multiple variables and multiple things coming at you from all directions. It's difficult right now. So if you're feeling it as a parent, I feel for you. Our church, we are praying for you. We're concerned about you, and we want to help. Tell me about the hard choices then that you've had to make up to this point, because you're not entering this in the fall for the first time. You had to make some hard choices and cross some of those bridges before. What were the hard choices that you had to make as homeschool parents? What are sacrifices you've had to make to do this?
I think for us, we've lived on one income the entire time we've homeschooled. I have not worked in a regular capacity or part-time or anything, because I spent a lot of time either starting ministries or nonprofits or whatever. So my volunteering is my work, but I've not had a regular job. So I think choosing to live on one income was a challenge. And that, to some parents sounds crazy. And there are times I look back and go, oh my goodness, what if I were? But it's a choice we've had to make. So we go without things. Our cars are older. We're not, going on maybe the same vacation that other people are. I would not change 1 ounce of that. I would not do anything different. I'm so thankful that we have chosen to live on that one income, and God has continually provided for us. It's not because we're like master budgeter Dave Ramsey, FPU kind of people. It's because God has been kind, and as we've taken steps of faith to be on one income for 20 years at this point, He's honored that, and I'm just thankful for that.
Plus, since you homeschool, you can make your own clothes, so you save money that
Here I
way
am
from
now,
buying all
and
that name brand stuff.
Just wove this morning, Chris.
So, yes, that's helpful. That's one. What about some others you've thought about, hard choices or sacrifices you've made along the way?
Yeah, so as I mentioned to begin with, it was a hard choice to even go into the homeschool realm, but it was what was best for my child. And along the way, throughout the years, every time we did make a shift from one curriculum to the other, from one style of homeschooling to another, or choosing to work or not work during a certain time period, all of that was a choice made around what's best for my children at this time. But that doesn't mean that because it's best, it's the easy choice. And so it's just, being able to trust myself and trust what I'm hearing from my husband and from my kids to make those decisions.
For me, one of the hardest things, it's going to sound terrible. I love my children. They're delightful, and I enjoy their company more than just about anybody nowadays. But there were times when just being home with them every day was a hard choice. You're like, oh,
they're always there.
This again. They're always here.
Yeah.
And so, just choosing to get up and do it again. So, that over the long haul, that was, a difficult choice. Sometimes I chose to go back to school, and while I was excited about that, that was a difficult choice to make. It was real hard to be in school full time for 2 years and have 3 teenagers and a husband who I wanted to maintain a relationship with. And we just kind of hung on for dear life. It felt like the wheels were falling off sometimes. It was a hard choice to stick with that choice that I had made for myself, for the good of my family. And so I won't get into that. I would be happy to share that story at another time. But not all the choices are just what does the child want or what would be easiest or most convenient really for anyone. Sometimes, mom or dad getting healthy or getting the help they need or making a tough decision on a professional level is ultimately best for your children, even though in the moment it might feel like, I don't see how this is better today. But I think a lot of hard choices are that way. You make them, and the next day it may not seem awesome, but you do it with a long view. And so, a number of things. We changed kind of the structure of how we chose to school, and that was hard too. But I firmly believe that the things in life that are really worth doing often are the hard things.
I think there are sacrifices that you make. You talk about one income, like we've done that for years, and then I've told Abby before, there's some things that would be so much easier if we would just. If the kids were in public school or in a different setup, if we'd gotten involved in foster care, and that has its challenges, and there's just a lot of things. And I've said over the years, do we have to do everything hard all the time? Can we do an easy thing occasionally? Can we just do it normal? Why do we always have to pick the weirdest, hardest, thing? But we've seen a lot of value there, and one concept that's been really helpful for me over the years, and this is something I would sort of teach and talk about outside of even this context, is that and this is going to sound really depressing, but I promise it gets better at the end. All of life is suffering, and that, so the way I would explain it is this. When I go I ride bikes with some guys on Monday morning, and when you go out there riding, you see people running because it's early and it's not too hot out, and you see people out there, kind of pounding the pavement running, and none of them look happy. I've yet to see the person running out there with a big smile on their face or whatever. They're just, focused and intense, and they're like logging the hours, and they're doing those miles. And I always think like, man, that looks unpleasant. But also like, well, good for them, right? Like they're out there getting after it and doing something that they think is going to help their body and it's good for them. And, someone pointed this out to me years ago, and it's just a good reminder. Like what they're doing looks like suffering, but not doing it is suffering too, in a different way of like health concerns and all that kind of stuff. So they are just picking the suffering that gets them where they want to go. It all hurts a little bit. You're faced with a whole range, which is what 2020 is a whole range of bad choices. And that's what it's felt like. So, I think they're choosing the sacrifice or the suffering that is going to get them where they want to go. And I think that's a good thing. And in a lot of ways, I think homeschool's felt like that to us of this isn't great either, but it's got a different set of problems, but we're choosing it because we think it will get us somewhere we want to go. Look, so let me sort of finish out this section of our time together with this question, because that was a little depressing, but let me get to the good part, which is, what are the wins you guys feel with doing this? Like, whether you went into it, I can't wait to do this, it's going to be the greatest thing, or something closer to kicking and screaming, or you're forced into it this fall, or whatever it would be. Like, what have been, for you, what would be the wins?
I think for me, this is one thing I'm super passionate about, is the relationship that I have with my kids is so very different than it would have been, just simply because of the time that I've spent with them. There is certainly value in quality time, but there is equal value in quantity time. And because I have spent so much time with them, our relationship is a different depth than what I see a lot of teenagers and their parents have. It's a different respect than maybe I see a lot of exchanges between parents and teenagers, because I'm there and we're working on those character things together. And that's what has been so helpful through the years. First, that someone else isn't getting the best part of my kids. I'm getting the best part of them, not getting what they've got left over after they're completely exhausted from their day and just kind of want to retreat to their home or to their room. I'm getting the best parts of them. And so that has been so good for us. And so now that I'm in with my oldest, almost through his teen years, and I look at him and go, I like him so much. He is so wonderful to be around. He's so great to talk to. But there were lots of days, like Abby said, that it was like, I gotta do this again, or we're still working on that character trait, or he's still, and I think so much too, one of the benefits of traditional homeschooling is it was really about me. It was about what God was gonna do in me through these years. It has not been about my kids being super smart or super educated or anything. It is about what God has done in my life and shaving off some of the very rough edges. Traditional schooling at home has done that for me. It's chilled me out a lot. It has made me, as he's grown me, just a better friend, a better person, sometimes a better wife, sometimes not a better wife. But it has changed me as a person. It's so much about discipling. The Lord has discipled me, and I have discipled my own children. And that has been the biggest blessing and the biggest gift to me, to get to do that, to be the discipler of my kids. And sitting on this side of it, I can say it was worth it. It really was worth it. And I'm so glad I chose it.
That's good.
So mine is going to sound kind of similar because it does go to relationships as well. I have amazing relationships with my kids. My husband has amazing relationships with our kids. There's a lot of trust there. We're in a stage right now where the youngest is 16, but the next one up is 18 and the next one up is 20. And so they were all teenagers at home at the same time. And because of, what Nikki alluded to, of just being able to work through things with them, we didn't have to react a lot to things. And so we've never had to ground our children. We've never had to punish them from, like take their phone away or take their license away from this, friend set of kids that we homeschooled all the way through. And then on top of that, the relationships with each other are very different than what you normally think of sibling relationships. There's not sibling rivalry. There's a lot of support. Like if one is winning at something, the other doesn't feel in their shadow. The other one is right there cheering them on. And then it turns to when the other one is winning something. And every day they say to each other, I'm so happy you're home when one of them comes home from work. I'm so, go have a good day and I love you. And these are teenagers, saying this to each other, and they mean it. And then when you point out to them that they mean it, they get choked up because they're like, yes, we love each other. So it's that relationship thing that's
I'm sending my kids to Amy's house. Just saying.
It's there. It's the relationship thing that's really, really huge. And then just, one more thing that I feel like is going to serve them for the rest of their life is that they know themselves because they've been in an environment where they have been encouraged, supported, discipled, so that some things were carved, out of their natural tendencies. And so they know themselves so much more than I ever did at their age. Like I was 40 probably by the time I got some of the wisdom about myself that they carry in them right now.
That's good. That's really good.
I hate to sound like a broken record, but yeah, I love being with my kids. I have 3 boys. They're competitive. They do fight. But there is a quality of relationship and the care that they have for each other and the way they kind of talk about each other in each other's absence. They really communicate a level of understanding and care of each other. And yeah, we've had those times to have those hard talks. When you're together all the time, the advantage is you can deal with stuff when it comes up. If somebody's had a hard day and it's 11 p.m., we can stay up and have that conversation. Or, if in the middle of the day somebody breaks down and just needs to go, have a snack and lay on their bed for a while, like we can do that and then we can have conversations and sort of deal with things in real time. And so that I think is a huge win. None of us would say that this endeavor is primarily academic, but I do think there are some wins to your kids getting to pursue the things that they love. And when we see areas that need to be shored up, we're able to do that, and we're able to make a call about what things are important for them right now, or what things we can wait on till later. So, Nikki, when you said it's been worth it, I had this framed print or verse on the wall and then in the kitchen windowsill. Since my kids were the first one was a baby, and it just says, at the proper time we'll reap a harvest if we do not give up. And I just was like, please God, let that be true. Please God, let that be true. And the whole time I was like, I believe this. I I don't know it, but I believe it. And our oldest is 17 and we're looking at colleges, and it's absolutely like, yeah, I'm so glad. And now I believe it. Now I know it by experience.
That's good. I'll add this wins of homeschooling. For me as a dad who works outside the home, 5 days a week or whatever, I was able to work my schedule so that Fridays would be dad day on homeschooling, so I could be home with them on Fridays, and then she would go and to get a break and sometimes work or whatever the season we were in. But I got to do the little math test with them, and I got to do, especially through elementary school when we were driving a lot of the curriculum. And I think that's been great, because as a dad, I don't want to just be like a spectator of just like or just like check in at the end of your school day and let me know how that went or whatever. Like it was pretty cool to be able to have that access. And also like I'm blessed to work close to my house, so I can come home at lunchtime and see my kids, and that's been a really cool thing, and they can kind of tell me what they're learning or what they're into. So I've seen a lot of wins with that. I also think just generally, I think for all the people going into this fall, I'm sure there's a lot of like, oh, I don't know if this is going to be great, and it maybe is plan B for a lot of people. But I want to suggest or challenge or propose to you that plan B may work out being fantastic, and it doesn't have to be, oh my gosh, kicking and screaming, I can't believe we have to do this, and there's a possibility that you could come out on the other side of this thing going, this was, even if it ends up being a semester or a year, or you end up continuing doing this, you may look back on this, of all the crumminess that was 2020, you may look back on this and go, that was a turning point for us, and it strengthened my relationship with my kids, or it built something in the heart of my children, or we have a better relationship, or it grew something in our family, or maybe it shifted my work priorities, and now it forced you into choices that I think it's really possible you could at the end of this go, this was even better. And so I would say this to anybody I'm coaching in life, to say, like, let that be an option for you. Let it be a possibility that this might be great. And you're probably not feeling that way. And if I look online at what people are saying, people aren't expressing that a whole lot. But I think it's also true. This could be great, and it could be a real turning point for you and for your relationship with your kids and your family. So that's the heart of what we wanted to cover. But what we did do is put it out there that if people have questions that they want to send us, we will hit them. So you don't know what these are. These are coming at you fresh here. And so to try to answer the questions that are on your mind and be as helpful to you as possible. So what we're going to do is we're going to answer those that have been texted to me. And then at the end, I want to give you a couple next steps and resources that we're working on right now. Our church started scrambling, I would say the day after we heard Richmond Public School was going virtual. We started thinking like, all right, then how would we leverage what we have as a church to support families, kids? Is it after school, after homeschool, school, mentoring? Is it like, what are the things that we can do in the situation that we're in right now to be a support to parents? We're still working on that, but I have some things that I want to give you when we're done here. So if you kind of hang with me till the end here, and I'll give you a couple next steps that I hope will be helpful to you. So let me go into the questions that we have. So here we go. Many people are not in position to homeschool or prefer traditional schooling. With that in mind, how can parents or guardians use some homeschool principles to further support their kids? So what would be some principles you've garnered over the years that you could use to support families like that?
I'll start. I would say, as you can probably hear through the way that we speak, the three of us have kind of different, maybe temperaments or styles in home. I crave structure and then I rebel against it. That's what I do. You learn the rules and then you can break them. But so it has been important to me from kind of day one with baby number one, to have some kind of routine, just routine. Schedule per se didn't always work great for me, but routine certainly. So, we get up at the same time, and then we have breakfast, and then we make our beds, and then we do, school for however long, and then we take a break, and then we go to this subject. Just having something predictable that everyone can learn to anticipate is one sort of principle that has saved me a lot.
The thing that I would add is that when school is over, let it be over. Like, be a parent, when you need to be a parent, be a teacher. When you need to be a teacher, if you're in that situation where you're being responsible for reporting back to the authority, because it can get really easy to carry that into the dinner time and after dinner, and now everybody's bogged down by it.
So keep it in its place. Even if it's in the virtual public school system where it's going to be whatever, 8 to 3, Monday through Friday, you say, keep it in its place. Don't let it become everything.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
I would just say to glean wisdom from others. None of us got where we are without spending probably countless amount of hours talking to other people who have been through what we've been through. And so if you don't know a homeschooler, I know that Chris can hook you up with one, but just ask questions and listen to wisdom from others who've walked this road is, I would say, the biggest thing that they could do.
All right, here's another question. I really like this question. What are some tips or tricks you've learned to keep kids motivated? And this would apply in a traditional homeschooling, it would apply as you're checking in on the virtual public schooling situation. What are some tips or tricks you have to keep kids motivated and interested in content that they don't have an affinity for, or they're not I'm not into math, or I'm not how do you navigate those things, the things kids aren't gravitating towards?
So first of all, be honest. Like if they ask the question, when am I going to ever use this knowledge of the invisible number, or not the invisible, the imaginary number?
Yeah.
Tell them probably never, but I'm going to sit here and work with you on it until we get it, because you do need it right now. So just be honest. That's one of the things. And then try to apply it to something currently that they're interested in their lives. Try to find a way to just apply it to something that matters now, because saying, well, you're going to need it when you take your SATs, and if SATs are 6 years down the road, they don't care. So find something it applies to now.
I would also say to remind your kids, but also yourself, that some of the most important work that they're doing is learning how to learn. You are not going to remember everything that you learned in 4th grade science. I mean, none of us remember all the things we learned in 4th grade science. You're not going to remember everything that you learned in, 10th grade literature. Hopefully you remember a couple of books that you read and thought they were great. Hopefully that ignited some kind of interest in you along the way. But really what you're doing now is establishing good habits and learning how to learn. And part of establishing good habits and learning how to learn is doing the parts of it that frankly are no fun. Because whatever it is that you do love, they say every job has its bedpans. There will be part of whatever it is, whatever your chosen path in life is, that you're like, ugh, I hate that part. But it's just part of it. And so sometimes we just have to, we might have to learn tricks to motivate ourselves. I'm going to set a timer and I'm going to do this for 15 minutes. I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to go, run some laps or have a snack or, call a friend and set a timer and get off the call in 5 minutes. Sometimes we need to game our own systems and trick ourselves into getting through stuff, but there always will be, forever and ever, amen, things that you don't want to do, even when you get to choose your life's path. So figure out how to address those things now. That's a good life skill in itself.
Good. What about teaching kids? Let's go with this virtual public school route. So they're going to learn something during the day, and so you're going to have an opportunity, because of the proximity your kids are to you, to reinforce, to check in, to hey, how'd that go, or how are you doing, or be supportive there. What about the things, how do you handle the things that are overwhelming to you, not just they don't have an affinity for, but they come to you with math and you're like, well, you just carry the one, and they're like, we don't carry ones anymore. We draw these grids and then we have this thing, and you're like, what are they doing over there in the school? How do you handle, for us, seeking out higher level math, because we didn't know how to do it. I've long since forgotten how to find X. So the higher level math, those kind of things, it was like, this is tricky. Not only did we not want to learn it, to teach it to our kids, but we didn't want our kids to learn from someone who just doesn't care about it, which is us. So we're like, we're going to need to connect you some people who think this is awesome, and then you can geek out about it if you need to. So how do you, I'm getting it back to a question. How do you handle the things that you're not good at or whatever, like to support them?
I think a lot of homeschool parents farm those things out, just like y'all did.
Yeah.
And that may not be a choice where parents are going to have to kind of come alongside their kids if they're in a virtual public school at home situation and come alongside them and learn with them. And it's the hard thing that you just do and know this is for a season. And you're going to learn. At my house, we still carry the one because that's how mom knows how to do math, and I do not care, and we are not changing that. But one thing I encourage parents in a lot is that in your own public school education, there were a lot of gaps. Every single one of us graduated high school and graduated college with education gaps. Our kids, either as homeschoolers or virtual public schoolers, will graduate with those same kind of gaps. You can't possibly know everything, learn everything. And so for me, like Abby said earlier, I'm teaching my kid how to fill their own gaps. And so maybe I'm not teaching them trig, but I'm teaching them, if you want to learn it, here's how you are going to do that. Here's some routes that you're going to pursue to do that. And they'll fill their gaps. I'm 40, 6, 7 years old. I'm still filling gaps because I need to and I enjoy it. And so just encouraging parents, you're not going to be Einstein, nor is anyone's expectation of you to be Einstein. Like, go ahead and just come to peace with the fact that I'm not going to be able to do it all, and neither is my local public school. But what I can give my kids is enthusiasm and excitement for learning and teach them how to do that on their own.
That's good.
And just know that there are a lot of resources out there. We are living in a time where we have so much information at our fingertips, and we can tap into that. And a lot of that's even free. There's Khan Academy, which is free, and there are some very well-known colleges like MIT who put their curriculum, their courses online for free for those students who are very academically astute and just need more than a parent can offer.
I'll also say, some of the best relational growth that I've had with my kids is through some shared struggle. And for my oldest son and I, recently this year has been looking for a job. And he and I are in different places in life, but just kind of the shared experience of like, man, it's tough out there right now, and you got to just keep at it, and you got to ask a lot, you got to pound the pavement and do lots of searches and talk to lots of people and, pick yourself back up. And so, if you're slogging through Algebra 2 with your kid and, you've been honest, like, this sucks. And, okay, we do the best you can, find those resources. And at the end of the day, you get through it together. And, maybe you've had a shared, struggle that is the basis of an enrichment in your relationship.
I'm glad you think our children's struggle was an enrichment in the relationship. I remember tears at the table over math, and I don't remember it being enriched, but I'm glad it felt that way to you.
But look where we ended up.
Okay, yes, they're wonderful now, but it was rough. I would also add this one. I've had several parents who are doing the virtual public school thing this fall, starting to form through, neighborhood groups, sort of form, like, we're going to form a pod of kids who are going to all learn in this group. And so they're like, let's get 5 kindergartners together. When you do something like that, the good thing about that, so if you've not tried to do that, I would think of your friend group and maybe even other parents that were in the public school with your kid. What you might find in that group is that someone else in the group has a background in math, and you'd be like, yo, I noticed you're good at math. Can you take my kid one afternoon, and I've got a little more of a language arts background, I'll take your kid this day. And so those kind of like co-op things that are sort of sprouting up is pretty great because it allows people to kind of function in their lane. And so that kind of stuff happens a lot in homeschooling, but I think there's a really cool opportunity for that to happen now for folks in virtual public school situations. What about this one? Think about the age gap between your kids. How do you navigate and keep it on track when, let's say, you have a high school or middle school or an elementary schooler all trying to learn in the home, which I think we did for a year. We had that split. But how do you classroom manage that situation?
Maybe the year we had that or somewhere in between, that was one of those places where my structure was helpful for me, and I literally was like, from 10 to 10:30, I'm helping him with math. From 10:30 to 11, I'm helping him with this. And then you will go and do the independent work section of this. And so some of that is just like really, drilling down into, we're going to have a schedule and we're going to set the thing. Some of it is, maybe you work in chunks with the, your brain's freshest, in the morning, maybe depending on how early it is, and maybe you do those academically challenging things, with one kid at that time while another one does something that requires less attention. So I would say it's some sort of, figuring out how to balance the focus kind of heads down kind of stuff, and then the places where they can, learn more independently is one of the things to look at.
I think one of the things I get asked about more than that scenario is, I've got toddlers and babies at home. How am I going to pull this off? How am I going to teach my elementary child or my middle schooler when I've got toddlers and babies? And like for us, we've all schooled kids where I'm teaching this one to read and one's over there eating dog food and one is like turning the water on in the bathtub and it's overflowing. Like we've all been in that scenario and had to learn school at the very young ages. School doesn't take long. When it's a one-on-one student-teacher ratio, the school day in traditional homeschooling is very short. I mean like an hour. For kindergarten, that age, it doesn't take long. And so it doesn't need to be this overwhelming thing. So we squeezed school in while the babies and toddlers were napping a lot, or hey, they're going to bed, so dad's going to get them ready for bed, and you and I are going to do math, or we're going to read together, or we're going to do something. And there's a million tips and tricks for what to do with those toddlers and babies while you're trying to do intense learning with these and having busy boxes and things like that. But I think the more common challenge is babies on hips and toddlers around knees while I'm trying to teach how to carry the one.
We don't do that anymore, by the way.
I heard that's so dumb because it's so easy.
One of the ways that we managed that was I noticed early on, because I was buying a first grade curriculum and a second grade and a third grade for each of my kids from the same company, and history was the same for the first grader as it was with the third grader, but in second grade they added a paragraph to the topic, and then in third grade there was another paragraph added. Same with science. It just kind of rotates around in those years. And so what I did was I actually taught from the oldest book, but then whatever the assignments were, then I gave the assignments based on the kids' actual grades and ages. So I wasn't overwhelming them with expectations of the older child or dumbing it down for the older one to the youngest child's expectations, but I could teach the lesson to all of them at the same time and then let them work independently on their age-appropriate assignments.
That's great. That's great. Another one that I think we ran into is our oldest is really good at math. And so when our middle son or our youngest son starts to get into some math concepts, now they're teenagers that we don't know, we can't find X at all unless you point it out, like where's X?
Bros, we're not that dumb.
I know, I blocked that out. I tried not to remember that from my childhood. But we've sort of deployed the older to teach the younger, like, hey, you know how to do this thing. Can you work with your brother on that? And then as long as they're not getting too combative and competitive, I wish our children, when one of them came home, said, I love you and I'm so glad that you're home, like Amy's kids do. It's not quite that way at our house, but that has been a helpful thing where they can help each other. And I would also say, when your kids learn to read, it's a game changer when you can say, here's a worksheet from the curriculum, like, go work on that, read it, and figure out what you need to do. I'm going to work with the other child on this, and we're going to play or whatever needs to happen. That's been a big game changer as well that I've seen. I think that's covered it. I hope there's been a lot of good that comes out of this for you. I think the traditional homeschooling model that we've all experienced, we kind of give you the pros and cons of that. I think people going into virtual public schooling this fall, I've heard them saying, kids are going to be checked in with their teachers basically on a screen from 8:30 to 3:30 or something like that, and parents I've talked to in that are saying, that's not going to work with my kid. And teachers I've talked to who have to teach that are saying, that's not going to work. And so I don't know what happens there. I think the public school may adjust as they go, and they try something and go like, this isn't going to work. But I just want to encourage you that you can get through this. And I think, thankfully, children's memories of some of these things are fairly short. This is a season in their life, and it was a brief one. And that, by God's grace, I think we kind of put that stuff behind us eventually. And that I think no matter how this fall looks, I think it can still be a good thing, and you can get through it and not be and it not decimate you. It can be okay. So I just want to encourage you with that. And who knows? I do wonder if the school system, which to figure out how to do public schooling for, in Chesterfield, 65,000 kids in different homes and from very different family situations and backgrounds, that is a complex nightmare. When I want to be critical of decisions they're making, I just go, I don't want to have to make that decision. That is really, really hard. So maybe all of us walking into this need to lead with and be as gracious as possible and go like, people are having to make really hard decisions right now, and with so many variables. And so probably that gracious approach is needed in everything in life right now, in this year, but always just generally. So give yourself some grace for that too, that you may get into this fall and feel like you're not doing well, or you're failing, or your kid's not performing at grade level and all that kind of stuff that kind of freak out about. But kids are pretty resilient and can bounce back and even pick up things. I even heard a story of someone who didn't teach their kid math at all until 9th grade because their kid didn't want to do it. I was like, this is crazy. Like no math. And then from 9th to 12th, they did everything. They learned everything on their time because they were interested in it, and they just plowed through all the calculus and all that. And so, I think we have these ideas that it's got to fit exactly in a certain way, and it doesn't always. And kids are designed to be sponges and learn a ton. So, what has been, last question, and then we're done. What has been the biggest struggle for you? Like the days you doubt, the days you want to quit, the days you're like over it. What triggers that for you? What's been hard? Because I don't think any of us are painting a really rosy picture of this is so amazing. There's some great things about it, but what has been maybe the biggest struggle?
I think the biggest struggle for me has been when you do go and you're looking for advice and you're looking for, how should I do this? How are you doing it? What does this book say I should be doing? And you cross the line from gathering advice to comparing yourself. That's the biggest struggle for me. That's where I would go, like, I don't even know if I should be doing this. My kids are gonna resent me for this later. Was when I would let myself fall into comparison. So try to steer clear of that.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I heard a sermon preached many years ago about the sin of comparison, and I'd never really considered it to be sin for me to look at the way God maybe has designed someone else or gifted someone else and somehow think that my experience or who I am is lesser because I'm using them as my standard. And so anytime I have struggled in my homeschool journey, it's because oh my goodness, look at that kid. He's a math wizard and my kid's over here struggling with long division. Or look at that kid. He's so much, has this skill or that skill. And I just sit back and go, I stink at this. What have I done? And believe those lies. And yes, I stink when I try to be someone else, when I try to make my child be someone else. But it's when I sit back and I rest in the grace of God and I rest in knowing who I am and what He's called me to. Those are the moments I can get through that struggle and to the other side.
That's good.
I think for me, the biggest struggle, I would say just sort of parenting in general, or being a stay-at-home parent, certainly with homeschooling. You said, why do we always have to do everything the hard way? And it can feel incredibly isolating. Everybody's already feeling kind of isolated. And so I would say that was probably the biggest struggle for me is just relationships, maintaining, fighting for connection with other people walking the path with you, or even people walking a different path, but just not to be alone and in your own head. That's been my biggest struggle, and biggest opportunity really to have an opportunity to create community, and because I know I'm not the only one feeling that, and so I had the opportunity to step out and create some of those things and bring other people along. And so I would say that's been the biggest challenge, but also kind of in that challenge, the opportunity then is to create the thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of you got to be proactive. It doesn't come to you. It doesn't always come to you easily. I would say to what you said, Nikki, that the comparison thing is real, and when you pull yourself out of like standards of learning, like the standardized testing kind of model, that it's amazing how quickly you still want to go like, well, but is my kid smart, or is this working, or are we? Everyone wants to know they're winning. Nobody wants to chop at a tree with a dull axe. You want to know like they're making progress, but that can be pretty crushing sometimes to spend too much energy on that. The comparison trap, the comparanoia that we can develop. So maybe a practical step is there's probably some blogs you should not follow anymore. Or maybe there's some Pinterest boards you just don't need to look at right now. There's some friends you need to maybe get them out of your feed for a while, because it's hard in our Instagram world to see people who they're killing it, and then you just think, well, I'm not, and all that, and that can be pretty crushing. Well, let me wrap up then with just these quick thoughts here. We, as a faith community here in Carytown, we want to be very supportive of you and what you're doing. We're trying to think of ways to support teachers. Public school teachers are in a hard spot right now. Parents are trying to figure this out. It's very complicated, and really a big heart for kids and families, and what this season's about to look like in the country. So we want to be supportive as we can. The two things that we're working on right now, one would be we have space, some great outdoor space, which I guess in the COVID world that we're in right now is a better setup, but we have some great outdoor space and some indoor space that is a block from here, a block from the Bird Theater on Cary Street. And our intention is to figure out how we can leverage that space to make it available for maybe some learning pods or some public school groups to come together in small numbers, so that it's not a large classroom, but a smaller number thing in small groups. And then maybe we're also looking into like getting some tutors and mentors to come and be support. Like if your kid comes and they're struggling this week, they've been working all week on something, they're struggling with math and they need extra help, we would have a math tutor available, something like that. We're working on that and trying to figure out how we could structure that and do that well and be compliant with all the things that are kind of going around, executive orders and all that kind of stuff, trying to do that well for the fall. And then the second thing is we're looking at what does any sort of, I know just about everybody's tired of a Zoom call, but we're trying to figure out like what would a Zoom call, ongoing support, Q&A, coaching, mentoring, help look like from people who have done it, because some of the things, even in the virtual public school, in the virtual public school situation, there'll be some challenges that you'll come across that are pretty new, but then there'll probably be some that are age old and that other people have kind of dealt with that as well. And so our hope is to maybe offer that as a resource of like a weekly, 8 o'clock on a Monday night or something, possibly offer some sort of coaching thing like that if we find that is what is wanted or needed. So what you can do for us is, if you're watching this on YouTube, in the comment box below or in all the stuff down below, you should see a link, and the link will be to a survey. And if you click on that, we will send the survey to you just to find out what your needs are, and it'll let us have contact with you, your email address, things like that. And we will not spam you. We're not going to send you a bunch of stuff about a bunch of stuff. What we will do is any solutions that we're coming up with around this or resources that we have, we will send that your way. We will take some tips that we've gotten and maybe distill that down into a PDF document, send it your way. As we look at opening up space, we'll send you information about what that will look like. If we're going to do any kind of online coaching, that kind of thing, we will send that your way. So your first step, if you want to keep this going with us, is to click on that link and then fill out that survey, and that would be a great way for us to know who you are, and we can keep it going. So really appreciate you taking the time to watch this and to connect with this, and I want to thank Nikki, Amy, and Abby for spending the time. I have thought about what we've been in with homeschooling with our kids for 12 years now or so. I have thought, man, this is great. Like, I wish other people knew about this, but I've never spoken up a lot about it. I haven't used any platform to really shout from the rooftops to say, like, this is really good. But I felt like this is a time to at least have a conversation and say, hey, there's some good in this too. And I want you to be encouraged that whatever this fall is, it may look less than ideal, but it could be some really good things could come out of it. And that's my hope and prayer for you. So thanks for joining us. And if you click on our YouTube channel and you like us there, we will have more content coming out that we can keep you notified through that. So thanks so much. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you found it helpful or encouraging, let us know by giving it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to be notified when we put out new content like this, be sure to hit subscribe and click the notification bell located right below this video. That way you won't miss any new content. Well, that's all for now. We'll see you next time.